The writing's been on the wall in New England, but now it's looking like it is in permanent ink. Bill Belichick's run with the Patriots appears to be coming to a close soon. According to an NBC Sports Boston report, Patriots owner Bob Kraft has already decided to move on from the six-time champion head coach after the season. At 3-10, the Patriots are the first AFC team eliminated from the playoff race. Belichick spoke to the media this morning, and in his true fashion, he did not provide much.
Do you have an understanding that Robert will not ask you to be back next year?
Yeah, I'm getting ready for Kansas City. That's what I'm doing.
Outside of all the rumors, do you want to keep is that something you want to continue?
Yeah, I'm getting ready for Kansas City.
Bill, while understanding that you're getting ready for Kansas City, have you and Robert discussed your future beyond this season?
Getting ready for Kansas City.
So Belichick is clearly getting ready for Kansas City this weekend. We are getting ready for the weeks and the time after that. And for that, we bring in our NFL expert, Tyler Sullivan, because what's the Patriots without talking to Tyler? And Tyler, this report, probably not shocking news. We expected that the end might be very near for Belichick. But now that the report's out there, now that he's fielding questions about it, does it seem just so much more real now?
Yeah, I think from the national perspective, I think that's the case, right? Everybody kind of coming to that fruition of, oh, wow, this is actually happening. This isn't just scuttlebutt. This is concrete reports from a guy like Tommy Karn over at NBC Sports Boston, who is as plugged in as you can get with the New England Patriots. And so when you start to hear those type of things nationally, you could say, wow, we are rocketing towards this at some point at the end of this season. But locally, this has been, the writing's been on the wall for this for quite a long time. It was not going to be a competitive football team. I think the Patriots were kind of disillusioned, specifically Robert Kraft, disillusioned to thinking that they were going to be competitive in 2023 when, if you looked at the roster, you looked at what they were able to collect at the skill positions at the offensive line, specifically the offensive tackles, there were some key weak spots for this team that really spelled a team that could struggle like we've seen unfold over the course of this season. And so, not surprising, but again, like you were saying, the fact that we're here, the fact that there are reports that we're talking about the Patriots moving on from Bill Belichick at the end of this season, it is remarkable because of how impactful he's been over the course of his tenure.
Do you make anything of the timing of this coming after a Patriots win, still with weeks to play in the season, and now we're getting even more finite reporting on this?
Yeah, right. It's really weird because you would think, okay, these come after a loss, especially on a Thursday where it's kind of that mini bye, traditionally a spot where teams would get rid of a head coach. But no, it's after a Patriots road win in Pittsburgh. Belichick's at the Army-Navy game, putting on the Navy helmet. You're thinking all the vibes are great, but ultimately, that is one bright moment in a Patriots season that's really has been few bright spots overall. But specifically, this report pointed to after the game in Germany, the loss to the Indianapolis Colts was when Robert Kraft really made the decision or had the belief that this was going to end in a departure of ways in some sort with Bill Belichick. And you kind of got to go back to that spot, right? Robert Kraft had spoken to the team leading up to that game in Germany, something he typically only does once a season, probably like around Thanksgiving, just to kind of send good wishes to the players. He's not as hands-on as other owners are in the NFL. So the fact that he was talking to the team before that game spoke volumes to how he viewed that as an opportunity to show off his team on the national stage. And what did they do? 2 field goals. They bench a quarterback in Mac Jones, their first-round quarterback, in the final 2 minutes of the game for Bailey Zappi. Just a real lackluster effort. So when you look at it from that context, yeah, it was not a great showing on a big stage that Robert Kraft wanted. So as much as we're saying, okay, the report's coming out now after a win, the decision, according to that report, was after that game and that loss against the Indianapolis Colts, which was one of the worst losses of the season.
So if the decision potentially to move on from Belichick happened a few weeks ago, it seems like that train started really ever since Tom Brady left New England. When you look at it now, because all the years have not been as friendly to the Patriots, does that put any sting on the luster of how Belichick will be remembered as the head coach of the Patriots?
Yeah, I think it's it's a sour note. I mean, we're in the epilogue of this whole thing, the Robert Kraft dynasty that he's been able to oversee with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, and he's been put into very difficult spots over these last few years, having to choose effectively Bill Belichick over Tom Brady. Tom Brady goes down to Tampa Bay, wins a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers, and for a minute, it did look like the Patriots were on the upswing. They missed the playoffs the first year with Cam Newton at the helm, but they were able to draft Mac Jones in the first round. They make the playoffs that next year. It seems like the arrow is pointing up. And ever since then, there's just been some questionable decisions on the part of Bill Belichick. Go back to last year, deciding to put the offense in the hands of Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. That certainly didn't work. Now you go into a season, like I mentioned earlier, you're undergunned at the wide receiver spot, putting the faith in guys like Devontae Parker and Juju Smith-Schuster, who are on the back nine of their talent. And the tackle spot, I thought, was malpractice going into training camp from a roster building standpoint, and that's only kind of proven to be the case as we've seen throughout this season. Not a lot of time to throw for either one of these quarterbacks. It's kind of just been a cascading poor decision after poor decision for Bill Belichick, and you can go back to even when Tom Brady was the quarterback for the New England Patriots. I mean, we all point to it, picking N'Keal Harry in the first round when you could have had Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, AJ Brown. That pick alone could have changed the trajectory of this whole thing. Who knows if Tom Brady stays, if everybody's more competitive. That is just one little snippet that you can point to and say, the decisions haven't been there or as sharp for Bill Belichick, and it's ultimately led to where the Patriots are right now.
This is a league where head coach and the QB pairing, you need that marriage to work, and clearly it worked with Tom Brady. But before we look at what's next for the Patriots, you look at Belichick's career, 83-100 as a head coach when Tom Brady is not the QB. That includes the playoffs. Is our perception of Belichick as this mastermind of a head coach, is that off a little bit? And is it just Brady mainly?
I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily the Brady versus Belichick. It's always, and Bill Belichick will say this, it comes down to the players. He will say that from time and time again. So ultimately, the players do win the games. They're the ones on the field making those plays. But there is an element of coaching. Obviously, you see a team like the Los Angeles Chargers with Justin Herbert, one of the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL. Head coaching maybe isn't up to par with his talent level, and you see that team struggling. So it needs to have a balance. And so I don't want to undercut what Bill Belichick has been able to do with or without Tom Brady, because he still is the puppet master, has still been able to pull the strings. Certainly it's a lot more difficult when you don't have the greatest quarterback of all time, or not even a serviceable quarterback, and that's what the Patriots haven't had, at least this season. Mac Jones nor Bailey Zappi haven't exactly been a baseline middle of the road quarterback. They've kind of been on that bottom half in the league. So you do need talent, but to me, it's been Bill Belichick, the GM, more so than it's been Bill Belichick, the head coach, when we're looking at all of this. You got to remember, he does all of those decision making. He's the de facto GM. I think that's where we should point it. It's not necessarily the head coach of Bill Belichick. It's the GM, Bill Belichick, not giving him the proper tools to win football games.
That 83-100 mark also includes Belichick's time spent with the Browns as their head coach. So you look ahead now for the Patriots and where they go next, because you figure, okay, probably need a head coach and a GM now. Do you think they look and tap in Gerard Mayo to become the head coach, or do they pivot completely away from Belichick and his regime and go somewhere else?
Yeah, it would be fun to say, let's clean house, let's have Robert Kraft do this whole new thing, bring in a Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan disciple, and we get that train rolling. But ultimately, I do believe that you're going to kind of see a more of the same. The disciples of Bill Belichick, like you were alluding to with Gerard Mayo, I think that that's probably the most likely scenario that we see him ascend as the head coach. Remember, this offseason, the Patriots put out an unprecedented statement saying that they were going to retain Gerard Mayo, signing him to a long-term extension to remain as the de facto defensive coordinator for this team. And that spoke volumes to me. That, I don't think, was a Bill Belichick decision. That is a Robert Kraft decision. He views him as the heir apparent. And I don't think that this season alone has changed the mind of Robert Kraft in the view of Gerard Mayo being that next head coach. So I ultimately believe it will be Gerard Mayo as the head coach. And if you look at general manager, I think it's a possibility that Matt Groh, the director of player personnel, ascends to that role as well. So it's not sexy, it's not bringing in brand new faces, but I think that that's probably the most likely scenario that we see a Mayo-Groh tandem as GM and head coach.
So then that begs to question and wonder what happens next for Bill Belichick. Where does he land? You look at the Panthers, they need a head coach. Potentially David Tepper goes for a splash there. Where do you think he ends up?
Yeah, and I don't think he's going to go off to the pasture. So I think that's what some people might say. Oh, does he just go down to Jupiter and retire and he hangs on his boat? I don't think that is the case at all. He's so close to passing Don Shula for the all-time wins list. So ultimately, he's going to go someplace else. Now, where is that next spot? I think there's a few teams that are very interesting. You mentioned the Carolina Panthers, not necessarily a good football team, as you can see with that record at 1-12, but they have an owner in David Tepper who has all the money possible to lure Bill Belichick from a financial standpoint to bring him in. They just cleaned house with Frank Reich. They could clean house with the front office with Scott Fitterer. So you would be able to give Bill Belichick essentially what he has in New England, which is total control. So to me, that's an interesting one from a money, control, and you're in a division, let's be honest, where you can pile up wins if you can get a team right. The NFC South is not competitive. That's why we have the Buccaneers up there as well if they move on from their head coaching staff as well. But I do think the team to keep an eye on, we mentioned it earlier, the Los Angeles Chargers. Brandon Staley hasn't been up to the talent level coaching-wise that he has in his quarterback in Justin Herbert. If you're somehow able to pair Bill Belichick, Justin Herbert, and those pieces on defense, that could be something special in the AFC West.
Yeah, Herbert and Belichick teaming up could be that new version to terrorize the league for years to come. We'll wait and see what happens with Belichick and how this marriage officially ends between the Patriots and Bill Belichick. He's Tyler Sullivan joining us here. We appreciate you for your time, and for even more time spent on the gridiron, make sure you check out the Pick Six podcast, because the crew has you covered all year long with all of the topics being talked about around the league. Most certainly, they will touch on Bill Belichick in that next episode, you figure. So go ahead, like, subscribe, and give them a follow.